The business community that is calling on the ANC to do away with rhetoric by coming up with a clear policy to address current economic challenges. Some of the major challenges are slow growth, a high unemployment rate and an extremely high cost of living. Analyst at First Source Money, Redge Nkosi, speaks to us now as he joins us virtually. Redge, thank you so much for your time. Let's first unpack what economic policy should look like in South Africa, where we have youth unemployment at very high levels and record highs, and we have inflation now having reached above the 7% level, with the likes of the US already in technical recession. What type of economic policy is expected from the governing party?
Well, I think we should begin quite urgently to move away from targeting inflation. That's not going to help us. What that means is that we're going to be increasing interest rates higher and higher as we go. We may as well reach 40%, and that will certainly depress economic activity and so on. So my view, South Africa has to quickly reorganize itself and begin to look at targeting GDP and indeed, as you mentioned, about employment, also targeting unemployment. That would be the first
GDP, Reg, pardon me for interjecting there, because that's an important point that you raised, because we're talking about gross domestic product, the economic growth in South Africa, something that we have not seen at an exponential rate. Already the forecast is of a mere 2%. That's not nearly enough to turn around or stabilize an economy such as ours, especially where jobs are needed.
Absolutely. And after all, not just jobs, to me. What we're looking at is deindustrialization that is going on at an alarming rate. Financialization is also going on at an alarming rate. There's no economy in history that has grown with such type of variables being so negative. So South Africa has to quickly reorganize itself and begin to look at entirely, in its entirety, the macroeconomic framework.
It becomes important at this time too, Reg, to talk about how a political party's economic policy is critical when it comes to stabilizing the economy. We've seen it somewhat, arguably successful in the likes of the US, irrespective of their own challenges, the UK, Germany, even the likes of Russia. But in South Africa, the two has never really had a marriage of two minds.
Not at all. I think the ANC broad membership do understand the need to reorganize the economy in a way that we can grow and employ. Unfortunately, it seems to me the leadership itself is caught up in some form of ideology that is contrary to what everyone expects of them, given that they are supposed to be a socialist type of a party. So the growth that we saw in Germany at the beginning of the century, not the century, the previous century, in Asia, even in the US, was not driven by the policy like the interest rate policy that the Reserve Bank conducts on a 6-weekly basis. It wasn't. So to expect that a developing country like South Africa, with significant challenges, that some of them come from as far back as apartheid time, to do away with that, it's impossible to have to use such type of policy regime. So frankly, it has to change whether we like it or not. Otherwise, what we should expect is chaos in terms of revenues.
That's another matter that needs clarification, because when we hear political rhetoric or even, commentary coming from the state, it is not viewed, or rather the South African economy is not viewed as a developing state, but rather one that's competing with developed states. And when we hear from the likes of the Reserve Bank maintaining that it sticks to its mandate and what it is that dictates their trajectory as what their mandate says it should be doing with regards to the South African economy. And then we have media reports already of the ANC currently at the 6th conference indicating that they are going to have this discussion of expanding the mandate of the Reserve Bank. What would that mean currently in South Africa? Because when we do have that conversation, we are accused of bordering on touching on the independence of the SARB.
Yeah, well, it's quite common that to be taught that we're touching on the independence of the SARB. to go back and look at some of these economies. Much of the entire Asia Pacific never used to have the inflation targeting as part of their monetary policy. China today has nothing to do with inflation targeting. Why is China growing? The independence of the Reserve Bank of China, where is it? In fact, South Africa's independence of the Reserve Bank is noted to be one of the worst, worse than some of the African countries that we have looked at. So the need for the change of the mandate of the Reserve Bank is pretty urgent. As I mentioned earlier, we need to move away from inflation targeting and begin to target GDP, begin to target unemployment, like the U.S. is targeting. Even New Zealand, which was the country that started inflation targeting, is now moved on to targeting unemployment. There is no way South Africa is going to move beyond these 2.5, 1.5 percentage growth without having to remove the way in which the economy operates. I mean, rather they remove the policies that are being practiced by the Reserve Bank and the Treasury. So we simply have to do that.
Interesting times indeed, Redge, and I'd like us to wrap up maybe if you briefly answer a question around where then should the confidence lie, if it's even there. We've seen the likes of business confidence, consumer confidence, and overall sentiment waning in South Africa, not only just this year or the previous year or the past 10 years, it's been over 2 decades.
Well, business confidence is one wane, quite frankly, as the economy slumps and continues to slump, because the economic policies that we have are inevitably going to lead us that way. And the population as a whole is sinking. There's no one who has got any hope. And if we continue on this trajectory, in my view, there is going to be a lot of chaos as the one we saw, in fact, worse than the one we saw in July. So the policy conference at the ANC must lean towards changing in dramatic ways the manner in which the Reserve Bank, the manner in which the Treasury, and indeed the Department of Trade and Industry work, without which we're going to be sinking and sinking. Even their own modeling suggests that the economy is not going to go anywhere. So why should it be that they should have confidence in these same policies that have driven us to where we are today? So confidence is going to be, in my view, lifted up as soon as we begin to alter the trajectory, which trajectory should mean changing the entire macroeconomic framework that we have today.
That's where we'll leave it. Redge Nkosi is an economist at First Source Money, talking to us about those expectations from the broader business community in South Africa, what it is that they are looking forward to in terms of what comes out of the policy conference that is held by the governing party.